Good morning. Today is Thursday, August 4th, and welcome to Zoom with Czarny. I'm Dustin Czarny. I'm the Democratic Elections Commissioner for Onondaga County. And today in my interview, I have Assemblyman Al Stirpe. He represents Cicero, Clay, Manlius, and into Cazenovia in the 127th Assembly District. He's been an incredible representative for his area, known for his humor and also his constituent service. Please listen and stay for the interview so you can follow along and hear his plans for re-election. Coming up later this month is the August primary, which we're electing a congressional and representative for both parties, Democrat and Republican. That's August 23rd. Some important dates to remember: August 8th, Monday, is the application deadline for absentee ballots. And then August 13th through the 21st is early voting. And then, of course, primary day is August 23rd from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. You can go to onvote.net to apply for an absentee. And you can also go to there to find out your polling location for election day and all the early voting sites. We have reached the end of our registration period. On the 29th was the registration deadline, and then on August 3rd was yesterday was the change of address deadline. However, we are still processing party changes because party changes are live as of right now. Yesterday, the State Board of Elections voted to ask Judge McAllister, who implemented the August primary, who failed to implement a party change deadline back when he implemented the August deadline, to re-examine that decision. So that could change any moment. So if you want to change your party to be able to vote in this election, you might want to act quicker rather than later. But I'll keep you updated on that on Tuesday when I come back for Commissioner in the Car, in case anything changes between now and then. So thank you very much, and enjoy this interview with Assemblyman Al Stirpe. And we're back. I'm very happy to have my good friend, Assemblyman Al Stirpe. Assemblyman Stirpe has been representing the north side of the county there, the Cicero, Clay, and then, of course, the Manlius area for well over the last decade. And he's been on our program a couple of times. Assemblyman Stirpe, thanks for making time to coming on Zoom with Czarny.
Thanks, Dustin. Great to be here.
So, Assemblyman, I know you've been on here a couple of times, and you're no stranger to the area. You're one of our longest-serving state representatives, but there's always new people that are coming into politics. So why don't you tell people about your background and why you got involved in running for the assembly?
My background, well, I got to Syracuse from the little village of Clyde, which is about 45 miles away from here, west, halfway between Rochester and Syracuse. I went to work for General Electric back in 1981, worked there for 6 or 7 years. And myself and a few of the functional managers in my business bought out the business from GE and created CID Technologies, which we ran out of a building in Liverpool, 20,000 square feet there. We did that for about 8 years and sold that. I was part of a software company called Cube Software. It was a enterprise resource planning package for small to mid-sized manufacturers. And after that, I went to work for a bigger software company, and then just decided, I need to do something that's more local, or at least regional. With the other software company, I was managing Montreal to Miami, all the way to North Dakota. So it was a pretty big territory, and I was on the road a lot. So one day I just read that my assembly person, Jeff Brown, was going to run for the Senate against Dave Valesky. And I said, I've always been interested in government, so maybe this is what I should be doing. So that was how I got started. Luckily, I had a couple of people I knew. I didn't know they were involved in politics before, but Mike Weiland and his wife had worked at DAC in Albany for 10 years, I think. And when he found out I wanted to run for office, he said, "Hey, you want to go have dinner? I'll tell you all about this stuff." And they really helped a lot. And I worked very hard and got elected. And that's sort of how I got into it. And other than the 2-year vacation I took between 2011 and 12, this is my 14th year right now in the assembly.
Well, and I think that's I I'm sure that you highlighted it, so I'm just bring it up because I think it's an incredible story. You don't see that very often where somebody, that was the big Republican wave year in 2010, and you were on the losing end of the race, but you didn't give up. You continue to stay active in the community and came back and won, and have won ever since. So I think that's a lesson in politics that I think some people don't even think about, is that you're not going to win every race that you're in, and sometimes you're going to have to lose and come back, and you did. You're going to come back in.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I had done a bunch of things in my life. I worked at GE, had my own companies. I'd worked in my father's little restaurant. I mean, I'd done a lot of different things, but when I got to the assembly, I found something that I really enjoyed because every day was different. You learn something new all the time. People say that as you get older, life just passes by so fast and everything. Well, that's if you're doing the same thing all the time on a kind of repetitive job. What I found was when I started in the assembly, time really slowed down because everything was new. I had to learn everything from scratch. And that's, one of the things that I really enjoyed.
So, we just got done with the session. The session ended in June, although we had a little bit more session this year. We'll talk about that as well. But a session ended in June. So, what are some of the things that you are very proud of that you accomplished this last session that you were able to bring back to the citizens of your district?
Well, we did a lot in grants this year. The school districts, the villages, everybody, I think, made out pretty well. We have a lot to thank our federal government for. They really came through with additional funds to help us fill all the gaps caused by the pandemic. And in addition to that, we had a $5 billion surplus because, I mean, sales tax was way up, in the last year or so of the pandemic. I mean, it just was a perfect time to be able to address a lot of things. So we addressed the environment. We're going to be voting on a $4 billion environmental bond act that I think will help tremendously, especially in areas of water, sewers, bridges, roads, everything. I mean, it's really going to be good. There'll be a lot of electric vehicle charging stations and grants for all sorts of high efficiency things. So I think that was something really good we did this year. Personally, I got to carry the CHIPS bill. So that was the state package of incentives to get large chip fab facilities located here in New York State. And in particular, in my district in the town of Clay and White Pines, just today, the Senate passed the federal end of that CHIPS bill. And now a couple more days, I think it'll go to the House of Representatives. And if they pass it, Biden will sign it right away. And then within weeks, I think we'll hear from some of the big chip companies who have been looking at moving here, whether or not anybody's coming. So that's really a big deal, so transformative. It will bring directly at the fabs 5,000 new jobs, all high-paying jobs, but it'll also bring about 200 smaller companies that will move their businesses here to support the fab facilities, and they will bring another 10,000, maybe 15,000 jobs too. So we're talking 20,000 jobs total that will be located here. Then our biggest problem is going to be housing. We're going to have to figure out how to build that many new units of housing for all these people. But those are good problems to have. We'll be very happy if that's our biggest issue that we're dealing with. But it really will change central New York. It'll help Onondaga County. It'll help Oswego County, probably Madison County too. And the bill also will help the Albany area. They'll get, where their big fab facility will do a huge expansion. Canandaigua has a facility that wants to locate there. And there's one other one, I can't remember exactly where it is, but altogether there's 4 of us. Ours is the biggest by far, though. As far as some other things, I've been dealing with, and we've all been dealing with lots of flooding in central New York. And the fact is, we have extreme weather events now that are different than we've had in the past. From 1870, I think, to 2000, we had 2 100-year rainstorms in central New York. And that's where you get 2 inches or more of rain in a 24-hour period. From 2001 to 2019, we had 7 of those events, and 2 of them were more than 4 inches. So the infrastructure we have in place right now to handle that type of water just isn't big enough. And our office gets calls every time it rains really hard, which is most of the time it rains. Last July, we had 2 100-year storms in the month of July. And I've got the pictures to prove how deep the water got, in areas like near Drivers Village, off of South Bay Road. It was, in some places, it was 7 or 8 feet deep. So we passed a flood mitigation legislation that forms a task force that will put together between now and the end of next June. We'll put together a plan for the upstate New York area along the Erie Canal. And I think in addition to the plan itself, it will provide funding for municipalities to go and really make upgrades to their infrastructure. So that's, I think that's another thing that's going to have a big impact.
Yeah, I mean, that chip plant is going to be something that is transformative, and it's talked about at every level. It's a state, a county, a federal project. I guess they're looking at the White Pines area as one of the biggest areas in the state. Schumer talks about it. How quick are we going to see? If they're not going to decide tomorrow they're coming here, this bill that's being passed by the federal government is, the first step. And then we have to, convince somebody to come here. I know there's been negotiations, but what do you think? How far down the line are we going to see this?
I think we're right near the goal line right now. I think within 4 to 6 weeks after the federal government passes the bill and Biden signs it, we'll, know from the company that they've been working with for almost 2 years now, whether or not they're going to come. It's something that's going to happen relatively quickly. Now, you got to understand, this company, if they decide to move here, is going to invest $20 billion in the facility. So it's a big thing. It's going to take, 2 or 3 years to build a facility. So you're not going to see chips rolling off the plant next year, but it's going to be a lot of construction jobs. I mean, a whole lot of construction jobs. We'll also have to do a lot of road work. I've got a feeling that we're going to have to build a new 81 ramp off of Mud Mill Road, because instead of loading up 31 with more traffic, not to mention trucks that would be going in and out of there all the time. It'd be better to completely redo Mud Mill Road from that park area over to 81.
Yeah, so it's and of course we're going through the the final stages of starting the construction of the 81 project, which will build up 481, which will lead towards the northern suburbs as well. So that's probably going to be part of that as well. So it's a lot of change for the area. So we had an extraordinary session. That's the official term for it for the legislature when they go back after the June session. And I've been doing this for a while. I don't remember. I think it's happened twice in my time of watching politics in the last 25 years. So obviously, it is something that is fairly fairly extraordinary. So why was it important to go back, and what did the Assembly and Senate and of course the governor work on when you went back?
Well, unfortunately, there are many things that are out of our control. One of them is the federal government. Generally, I'd say we have work to do a lot of times when the federal government doesn't do its job and is inactive. Unfortunately, this was the opposite. The Supreme Court was extra active, and they made a couple of rulings. One was they did away with Roe v. Wade, saying that each state had to go ahead and do its own abortion legislation. And then they went ahead and said that the rules that New York State used for concealed carry permits was unconstitutional. And we couldn't do that anymore. But they did leave an opening and said you had to identify the areas where people would not be allowed to have their concealed carry with them. So that was the reason. Those were the two things we went back for. I think things were pushed a little too quickly. I know out of the two bills, I voted against the one bill that had to do with the concealed carry permits. And, generally speaking, if you're going to have an extraordinary session, and I've been involved in a couple of them now, they talk about it first, they send you an outline of a bill, and then you'll go into conference, you'll talk about it, make comments, ask questions, they'll make some notes, they go and sit with the Senate and say, this is the response we've gotten back, what are your people saying? So they'll put together another edition of a bill, and then they'll come back and tell us what it is. We'll make some more comments. The Senate will get it again, the governor will look it over, and then we'll come to some kind of conclusion. Sometimes, we'll even have public hearings to get some input. But this time, on a Friday, they announced that the next Friday, I guess, Thursday or Friday, we're going back on extraordinary session. Well, we got there at noon to convene. We didn't see a bill. In fact, we didn't conference until 3:45 a.m. the next morning. So we just sat around and talked to ourselves basically for a long time. And they just didn't have a bill. And when they finally put something together, they couldn't answer all the questions. It didn't make sense to me, some of the things. And I just said, I really can't support this. I know that my district will definitely not support this. I thought some of the articles in the bill were good. They, instead of having each county, decide and have judges decide whether or not you could get a concealed carry permit. Now it's consolidated. It's going to be the Criminal Justice Department and the state troopers together will manage all of that. So it's now centralized. They've given a standard definition of why you might need it instead of you having to tell the judge why you need it. That's what was ruled unconstitutional. and there's a lot of training required that's associated with it. All those things were good. It's just the fact that, by the time they got done listing 20 areas you couldn't carry in, there was no place but your house, your car if it was moving, and a spaceship if you happen to be Jeff Bezos. I mean, that was about the only places you could do it. So it just didn't make any sense to me.
Well, you are running for reelection, and you've been your district has not changed all that much. There was a little bit of a movement from the southern part of Onondaga County over into Cazenovia area. But for the most part, your district that has been the main part of your district, Cicero, Clay, Manlius, the most populous part of your district, is still there. And you are running for reelection. So what are one of the things that you're hoping to do in your next term when the voters send you back?
Well, next term, I'm hoping that a lot of the things that we passed this year, with the help of money from the federal government, is executed well. I think we're all going to keep our eye on things like childcare. I mean, we put a tremendous amount of resources into childcare because of the lack of workforce in almost every business. That's one of the biggest complaints we get all the time. So one of the reasons we have problems is there's no childcare. And during the pandemic, when kids, either were home for school or had a hybrid system, one of the parents had to stay home basically. So we're hoping that this helps a lot in that area. We're also running a lot of workforce development classes in nursing, direct service personnel that works with people with disabilities and in nursing homes and things which are in a crisis situation because they're short of staff. There's a lot of things like that that we're, hoping works out well. As far as new things, one thing that didn't get accomplished that we were hoping, at least a bunch of us, lawyers, and now I'm trying to remember what they're referred to, but the lawyers that get hired to represent people who are arrested, and
the assigned counsel, is that
assigned counsel, they're still being paid the same rate as I think 25 years ago. And you can't get anybody to do that either. So we fought real hard. We wanted to bump the pay rate up to maybe $150 an hour or something like that. And it just didn't happen. In the end, we found out there's a court case where people are suing to raise that the amount that they get paid. So the governor didn't want to go ahead and pick a number. She wanted to wait to see what the verdict was in the case, and then we would go ahead and move forward with that number. So anyway, I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, there's always more stuff to do. Mental health is a huge issue still. We did provide lots of funding for that. We've got to hope that the schools are able to execute that and help out. I've got something coming up August 2nd. The speaker's coming up. We're going to make an announcement that we're going to provide $1 million grant to build a new facility that will have multi-purpose. It will be respite for families whose kids have, kids with disabilities. So if they wanted to go away for a weekend or a week for a vacation, they'd be able to leave their child there. We also have for dual diagnosis, they have disabilities and they have mental health problems. We found, especially during the pandemic, that there was, a vast increase in dual diagnosis. So we're hoping to help them. And then social worker services for a lot of folks. So, we're going to do that. And, I'm sure there'll be lots of things associated with the transition from fossil fuels to renewables that we'll get into again. And that's definitely one of the things I'm hoping we we'll get successful on this year.
Well, I always, we're getting towards the end of the time period that I like to have for these podcasts, but I always like to end with one question, which is, what haven't we talked about? What is something that we haven't been able to mention here on this that you either want the voters to know about you or the work that you're doing or anything along those lines?
The only thing I want to talk about is the voters, basically. This year, there's a lot of things that are at stake, especially at the federal level. But, we know in the past that the people who vote against progressive issues, who want to keep everything the way it was in 1950, are very committed to their cause. You saw it with the abortion issue. I mean, they've been fighting that for 50 years. They never let up. We, for some reason, don't seem to have people that are that committed, and we're going to need people to be very committed. So not only are they going to have to go out and vote, but they're going to have to do things that maybe make them feel uncomfortable. They're going to have to talk to their relatives and their friends and everybody else, their neighbors. They're going to have to get people to come out and vote. If enough people vote, we know that more people feel the way we feel than the other side, but we seem to always have problems getting people out to vote. And we really, really have to do some hard work. We have to be dedicated, both with our time and our finances, to make this happen. Otherwise, we're going to be kicking ourselves, for the next, I don't know how many years.
Amen. We've been saying this every year, that this election is the most important election in our lifetime. And that's because we live in perilous times. And anybody watching the January 6th committee hearings, anybody who has paid attention to the national and even local politics, can see that there is a reason and to come out and express your wishes by voting. And if you don't, your lifestyle, your way of life may be dictated to you by other people. Right. So I agree. We are in very perilous times. So, Assemblyman, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you on the web, Facebook, all of that?
Yeah, on the web, it's www.alstirpe.org. On Facebook, Citizens for Al Stirpe. I've got Twitter @Al Stirpe. I probably have some other things I don't even know about. I'm too old to know that about some of that stuff. But, we try to get out in all forms to keep people informed about what we're doing. And this election, I think, they're going to try to make it out of bail reform and crime and everything. And what we're going to stick to is all the good things we've done over the last 2 years. And that's a ton of it. As chair of small business, I know we've put out, $1.4 billion worth of help for small business. We've done a lot for workforce. I'm telling you, we got a lot of good things to talk about. We don't have to talk about all that stuff they want to talk about. We have to talk about the stuff we want to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Assemblyman, for coming on Zoom with Czarny, and thank you for fighting the good fight for as long as you have, and always using your humor and your way of charming people instead of speaking down to them. I think it's very much appreciated, and it's valuable in our community. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I always appreciate coming on.
That was my interview with Assemblyman Al Stirpe. Next week, I'll be interviewing Family Court Judge Julie Cecil. And this weekend, I'll be releasing my weekly wonk. Now, I used to do that on Wednesdays, now releasing it on the weekend. That will be my article on the overall turnout for the June primary this last June. And that'll be my final look back at the June primary, just in time for the the August primary that is ahead of us. So check that out on my website. Go to dustinczarny.com and subscribe. Remember that website will always be free. I pay for it myself. I don't take any outside money for it. It's part of my educational outreach as these podcasts are for the voters of Onondaga County and New York State. So enjoy your weekend, and I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.